Start letting people in, okay?
Okay.
Here
You said
we go.
YouTube Live as well? It's YouTube Live as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube and Facebook.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour, your official home on Saturday, midday. Great to see you all again. I love that this is working out. I love that we're seeing everybody and coming together and creating this wonderful community.
Ooh, look at all these people.
Amplifying this wonderful community. This has been such an honor to be able to facilitate this.
I wish I could see the class. Sorry, Ethan. Keep going.
Are you, can you see? Are you missing something or?
No, I'm here. I'm seeing stuff. What I meant to say is,
can you see everybody?
I can't see everybody. No, that's okay. I see it like
what view are you using?
I see a top row.
Oh,
that's all right.
Gallery view.
That's okay.
Yeah, choose a gallery view if you want to. You should be able to see more people.
I'll just
appreciate it.
Yeah, it's okay.
So,
okay.
Ethan, I just wanted to say that. Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say hi to Bill Monroe. He's looking very. He's looking very ominous in his hoodie over there.
Yeah, he's a secret gangster.
We've got like 3.5 feet of snow outside, so I'm just
awesome.
It's hovering around 0 today.
Nice, love it.
I'm really truly grateful. I'm in Southern California with the door open and the window open.
It's 70 and sunny here.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, David?
I want to say before we start that I've known Nick for about 20 years, and for the first half of that, I was really intimidated by him because he knows so much, and I felt like I was like a country bumpkin compared to this guy. And he also had this cool kind of like 50s jazz musician, nothing rattles me kind of vibe, and it's like, Jesus, who is this dude? And then I found out he makes a good living in the piano business, living out in the middle of Chitlin Switch, Idaho. I mean, some little town way up in the mountains in Arizona. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
And I started going to classes and reading his articles, and it's like, this guy's a master. And he knows a lot about a lot of different stuff. He knows a lot about action. He's an engineer, man. How intimidating. He knows a lot about actions. He knows about soundboards. He knows a lot about a lot of stuff. So use him in this hour and ask him whatever questions you want to ask.
Yeah, I'd like to ask questions. Yeah.
I'll give an intro here and then we'll dive into it. Okay. Sound good?
Cool.
So just to remind everybody, you are here for Piano Tech Radio Hour. It's being brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, which is an online educational resource that offers you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at www.pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. When you get to the homepage there, you can click the link to find out about our upcoming convention, which our guest today, Nick, will be teaching at. So we're very excited to have him dive even deeper coming up in March.
Yeah.
And I'll give a little bit of a bio of Nick, and then we'll get rolling. Nick combines a formal engineering background with over 40 years of hands-on experience in piano design, manufacturing, and rebuilding. He has authored numerous articles for the piano trade and has been a featured instructor at piano technical seminars all over the U.S. His business currently revolves around rebuilding and manufacturing custom soundboards for the piano rebuilding trade. So welcome to the program today.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here, Nick.
Good to be here. Thank you, Ethan and David, for inviting me in. So how do you want to begin?
My pleasure.
Why don't you give us a little bit of maybe it's changed. So either give us a sense of like what's your day-to-day now, or if now is not much of a day-to-day, what has been your day-to-day in terms of what you're working on and within the piano industry?
Wow, that's a big question. My day-to-day now is I bake bread. I do a lot of bread baking. Semi-retired, but I still have my finger in the pie considerably. I still have a couple of soundboards coming in. I've got a Steinway B out in the shop with a new board and a new action. And so
Wow.
I'm still very much involved, but day to day, you know, I'm going to say 20, 30 years ago was, you know, heavily involved in shop work, action overhauls, you know, a lot of voicing, Well, that's, you know, when you do these big jobs and you put new hammers on, you're voicing all the time. And
Especially 25 or 30 years ago. Jesus.
yeah, then, yes, absolutely. But then
Yeah.
continuing, you know, all through this time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If we just talk about the voicing thing for now, just in a couple of minutes here, we'll get back to it, I think. Is I learned early on that when people love the way their piano sounds, even if I don't try and talk them out of that. And also, I mean, I'll point some things out. Are you really happy with this? You know, the way it sounds. And I'll play some notes, and I might say, to me, this sounds a little bright. And no, we love it. Everybody that's played the pianos love it, and so forth. I don't push too hard. But when they tell me, I used to love the way this Yamaha sounded, you know, 5 years ago or something, and now it's I can't play soft, I can't do this, I can't do that. That's when I dive in. I've been explaining this is why, show them the hammer and so forth. But we're really working against a lot of factors there because it's very, very much a subjective issue. David had a question?
Yeah, what were you
Do
going to say,
you
David?
show it? Yeah. My question was, at that point, when the people say these hammers are shrieky, they're too bright, do you actually do something to knock them down, to knock one down a little bit and say,
Well, that's a little scary. That's a good idea. If you make such a change to one hammer in the middle of the scale, then they're stuck with it, right? So
that's why you got to make a small yet noticeable change, I guess.
Yeah, okay. I make a dramatic difference. Basically, what I do is I used to carry a thin hanky with me, and I would pull the action out. I put the hanky on top of the hammers, right? And believe it or not, you could play, and the change is instant. They're like, wow, that's a lot mellower, you know, than it was. In some cases, if you play the note enough with that hanky on top there, they can hear that's the tone. I want something more like that. You know, then you're home free. Then you can explain, okay, I can get it to there, but the reason this is what I'm going to have to do, and then you start talking about the money, the time, and all the rest of it. In some cases, I've been able to, if I didn't have my hanky with me, I had some sort of cloth that I could actually put under the string and bring it back up around and make sure that it was under the hammer and then hit that. And that was just enough to make a change in the way that particular note sounded. I just wanted to show them that a softer impact, quote unquote, is going to make a big change in the tone. So that was one of my techniques of getting them there. But
that's a great risk-free idea.
Yeah. But I've had situations, and I'm sure that you that voiced a lot too, where husband and wife both play, and wife is better, let's say. You know, she knows she's more accomplished than dad, and so, you know, where does this go? And I've had instances where I've voiced it, and mom loved it, and dad hated it. The reason dad hated it is because he doesn't know how to dig in. When we voice hammers, we're putting that variable sense of, you know, what are we talking about here? The hammer hits the string, and it has a variable sense of compression to it. So the harder that hammer hits the string, the higher the partials are going to come out. Now, an accomplished pianist knows that. They know how to dig in and get that when they need it. But someone that's not that accomplished, they don't. And so to them, their normal playing comes out too dull, too soft, too mellow.
Right. It's mezzo all the time for those people.
It's mezzo all the time. Yeah. So we have to voice for those particular tastes, which in a sense complicates the thing considerably, because who else is going to play this piano? Is it just you? Or do you have, you know, is this going to be used? You have this big room, you've got this Steinway B here. Are you going to have a lot of parties? Do you entertain a lot? In other words, do you have the professors from the university coming over? Are they going to play it? Is it that sort of thing? Because at that point, I will almost have to
So-
insist, I'm going to have to voice this to a performance level. And, you know, we're all going to have to live with that, because I guarantee if I bring this down too far, somebody else is not going to like it.
The players are not going
David?
to like it.
What
Yes.
were you going to say, Dave?
Yeah.
I was going to say, you present like a doctor, like somebody who really knows what's going on, and that you have the answer, that you can, whatever the issue is, you can sit there and communicate with them to a high enough level so that they can feel comfortable with you doing whatever you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's the secret of that situation, I believe. Don't you?
Well,
That you've learned how to
yeah.
be in relationship with your clients.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love about this business so much, is that it's so personal. It's great in that regard. You know, we really have this one-on-one relationship. These people invite us into their homes. We meet their dogs and cats. We meet their kids. They invite us back. You know,
I know.
over and over again. It's a wonderful relationship. It's one of the things I've always appreciated about being in this business. But I think in all of the various disciplines, if we talk about, you know, piano's in three big boxes. Let's say we've got the box itself, we have the belly that we're concerned with, or should be. We should know something about that, even if we're just tuners.
Yeah.
We have the action. How does it play? And then we have the sound. How does that factor in? In other words, obviously the tuning is the first part of the tone. And then we got to work with the hammer. So we have three big areas right there. And in every one of those areas, it's only a small handful of things all of us need to know and can know, in explaining at least the basics of what's going on. You know, piano tone really begins in the belly. We all know that. You can't get out of it from a hammer if it's not in the piano to begin with. So there's a big area right there. Well, how do we talk about that? I mean, obviously it can get very confusing, because you have a 7-foot piano next to a 5'1" piano. Obviously they're not going to sound the same in cant. The bellies are very different.
No, but
the bellies still have everything in common with each other.
They do. And what you can do, what I do, what I've grown to do over 30 odd years, 40 odd years, I pluck strings and have them listen to the decay, the sustain and decay. And I show them, if I pluck a string that's functioning at the top of its efficiency, I say, this is how every string on this piano is supposed to sound. And it pretty much does, because the soundboard's functioning efficiency. Listen. It has blooms. And, you know, people can hear that. Everybody that I've ever showed it to can hear it. So it heals the sting of, you're going to do what to my piano and my hammers and my whatever. Jesus, you know, heals that sting a little bit.
Well, a hammer, obviously plucking the string is a good idea, because in fact, not only that, also for the partials. And one of the things I like to do, someone says the piano is, well, I do this anyway, just in terms of voicing and just getting a sense of what the piano is compared to what I'm getting out of the hammer. Now, we know the hammer strikes the string at a certain distance from the capo bar or the A-graph. And what I like to do is just sort of estimate that distance, whatever it is. And then I go to the back of the string where the bridge is, and I estimate the same distance. So in other words, I want to get that strike point, but I'm putting it between the bridge pins and the front of the piano. See what I mean? Right? So if I know it's hitting at an inch, the hammer's hitting at an inch, I go to the back and I figure an inch right there. Then I take a plectrum, which I have a long, sort of longish maple wedge that I made. That's like a big long guitar pick. It's got some flex to it. And I'll strum that string right there, right at that point. And if I hear all the high partials coming out, I say, well, okay, it's in there. It's in the box, as some of us say. Then if I play the hammer and I don't hear those same high partials, then I know the hammer's not giving out what the piano has to give. So that's another way I communicate with customers, but mostly, myself if I'm in the shop. But obviously in a field setting too. So that's another little trick that I work with.
Just to reiterate,
hammer striking a string. Keep going, David.
That was Ethan. I was just going to say
Ethan,
to reiterate.
Go, Ethan.
So you just look to the point where the hammer hits the string, and then you use a pick or something like that to pluck it there to say this is the place where the tone should be coming from, and compare that with how it sounds when the hammer hits the string. Yeah?
Yes. This is most of the concern is going to be in the so-called melody area, right? And also you have accessibility. So you can't really, in the front part by the A graph, the dampers, everything's in the way. So you can't really strum it there, right?
Got it.
So all I want to do is figure out what is the distance, more or less, from where that hammer's hitting the string. If it's an inch, then I go to the back of the string, and I figure an inch from the bridge pins out.
I see.
So in other words, I'm
pluck it there.
Yeah, pluck it there, right.
Okay,
so
because the dampers would be in the way.
Right.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Wow.
Interesting.
So that's brings
amazing.
up a lot of stuff. I can hear it right there. So listen to all the pipe, you hear all that tinkling sound and the rest of it. Now, granted, when you pluck a string with a plectrum, you're going to get a lot of high partials anyway, no matter where you do it. But it tells me it's in there. It tells me it's in the box, and that's all I need to know. At some point,
there you go.
Right. At some point, if the hammer it needs to be harder, you can keep creeping up on it until you begin to hear those things kick in that you're listening for. This is assuming it's too dull, too dead to begin with.
Hey, Nick, can you talk about the absolute crucial necessity of being a good diagnostician as a piano technician, coming up to a piano and basically knowing in a very short period of time what's going on with it, what's going on with the action, what's going on with the tone, what's going on with if there's any real anomalies, Can you talk about that?
Other than the usual stuff, in other words, if the action is really bad, we're going to know that instantly.
Well, sure. Right? I'm talking about, like when you come up to a really good grand piano, but that's just needs a bunch of tweaking, action, regulation, tone-wise, to be able to really understand what it needs in a triage way. What's the biggest bang for the buck that could happen to this?
Well, as you know, you play it, and you can tell immediately. So let's assume that it's in tune, even, right? At least enough in tune. You can tell pretty quickly if there's sort of a balance to the thing. Does the melody area, does it speak out? Is the bass too boomy by comparison? Right. Is it all too dead? That
yep.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
But for me, the first thing I want to know is the problem in the box or is it in the hammers? And that's why I'm talking about these other things about plucking the string, strumming it with a stick, for not only for sustain, but also to be able to hear, are there partials coming out? Because a soundboard that's dead, or in some cases, the soundboard's not dead, but the bearing is wrong. There are times when, the most important part of down bearing or checking it is the front bearing. Is there a front bearing? Does a string go up to a bridge uphill, go over the bridge? And it doesn't even necessarily have to go down. That's the usual model that's in our minds, and it's rarely the case in the real world. But you want this at least to be true, right? If this is true, there isn't anything you can do. I mean, you can regulate the action, you can tune it. You can make it better than it is, but it's never going to be what it should be because you have basically negative front bearing at the bridge. So that's one of the first things that I'm going to look at, right? And before I can even do that, I want to be able to tap at least a few strings down to make sure that they're down on the bridge. And, working with
And is
the bubble gauge,
and is that just a visual? Oh,
it can
that
be
was my
visual.
question. That you do that with a bubble gauge?
There's even a quicker way.
You use it.
I'm going to pretend. Okay, this is my bread knife. All right. Let's say
I
we
love that
have
you have a bread knife and a drumstick as props there. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I was hoping you break out in a drum solo at some point.
it could
Is it a
happen.
cowbell?
So if you put,
Careful,
if this is,
careful hitting the cowbell.
More cowbell.
Yeah, I know. It affects the sound for you guys. Yeah. More cowbell, somebody said, I know.
No.
No,
it's
yeah,
not.
don't bang
Yep.
it. Don't bang it.
This is the top.
More
This is
cowbell.
the top of the bridge. Yeah. And you take your little 6-inch flexible ruler, the little steel one that we all have, right? And you place it between the strings right on the bridge top. Okay.
Nikki,
That tells you that.
are you talking about the one that are you talking about the one that we keep in our pocket protector?
You're the one we.
Yes.
Yeah, the real nerd stuff. Yes, the pocket protector.
That's right.
And you put it on the bridge top between the strings. It's going to give you the plain top of the bridge, correct? Right? Now, if the string happens to be going off in this direction, this is going to be below it. This is going to be below the string if it's going off in this direction. Is that clear? Let me do it this way.
Yep.
I'm really going to knock this all over.
Are you talking about
You can see how the ruler, which is my knife, is below the string, which is going uphill. You can get an instant sense right there. The opposite string, if bearing is good, right,
yeah.
You'll see it this way. That makes sense? Remember, this is the steel ruler. This is the string.
I have.
You'll see it immediately.
I bought some bearing sticks from Dale Irwin, and I use the little short bearing stick. And it shows me immediately.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's a big, huge red flag for that piano if you're going to record it or perform on it. It's going to be for any serious use if it's got, reverse front bearing.
Yeah.
It will never sing.
No,
like
it can't. It can't, because instead of pushing down on the soundboard, or even in a neutral situation, which isn't the worst case, but the interaction of the string to the soundboard is just all backwards. It's not working right. It's constantly pulling up on that front pin. And if you would actually pull those pins out, the string would fly right over the bridge top. And so that's obviously not going to work. But that brings up, the whole thing about how soundboards are supposed to function. And I can get into that a little bit here. I mean, things become axiomatic after a while and almost.
Go ahead, just again.
Somebody asking?
No, I think that David just said, yeah, go ahead and continue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have some things. I don't really have.
Because as we were saying before.
Okay. I don't see David.
As we were saying before,
David, David's actually
going back to the basics. Very good.
Yeah. The soundboard, it floats. It's been floating around for a long time that the least bearing you put on a soundboard, practically zero bearing, the better. And if you say something long enough over and over and over again, then axiomatically we begin to say, okay, it's unquestionable. That's it. We all know, when people say everybody knows that blank, 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 right? Or it goes without saying that blank, blank, blank. Well, it could be
conventional wisdom is blank, blank, blank.
Blank, 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 something like that.
Yeah.
Well, a soundboard is supposed to be compressed. They're made to be compressed. They're not made for strings to just sort of lie on there without pushing on the board. I mean, this is the simple physics of the matter. I mean, look at a violin for one thing. The strings, they attack that bridge, that little skinny bridge, at a very, very sharp angle and drop down. There's supposed to be downward pressure on that spring. The soundboard is a spring. That is, if you make it right, or if the manufacturer made it right, it is a spring. It's supposed to compress. if I had a little coil spring in my hand and I went like this, I would compress that. And when I did that, what did I do? I put energy into that spring, and energy has to be put into the soundboard. How much has been developed over time, and it's a funny thing because the piano really was invented before there were computers and before there were all sorts of heavy investigations into it with oscilloscopes and various timing devices and so on. And how was it developed? How was it determined that, well, we like this one? Well, it was, experiential. And people's ears picked it up and said, this is what we like. This is what goes. The same thing with actions.
Yep.
Why is 10 millimeters, give or take, a small amount? Why is that the amount? Why isn't it 15? Why does the hammer blow?
Because that's what artists
45
like.
or 45 or 46 millimeters? Why isn't it 72? Right? Because as human beings, we
Exactly.
respond to those numbers. If we were like Goliath, from those pages, pianos wouldn't be what they are. They'd be a totally different thing. So how much pressure has to be put on a soundboard basically has been worked out more or less to about 4 pounds per string, which would be 12 pounds per unison, right? It's easy to multiply that by 88 notes, and you get some sense of how much pressure needs to go on there. The other part of that is how far down is the soundboard going to sink under that? If it doesn't sink at all, if it doesn't compress, you're going to have a long, thin, sustaining type tone, but no body to it, right? Because the impedance is so high. Now, impedance is a big word and it gets thrown around a lot, but basically all it means is that it's fighting motion. When there's a lot of impedance, there's a lot of resistance to motion, right?
So the soundboard is fighting the sound vibration.
Yeah, right. But when it's singing properly, it's fighting the sound, the mechanical vibrations of the string. It's fighting them in just the right way. But if you have a soundboard that's too thick, it's too heavy, it's heavily ribbed, it's massive, then the string is not really pushing down on it. I mean, it is, but it's not getting anywhere. It's not compressing that spring. So what you get is a lot of impedance in there, and so that you get a lot of sustain. You don't want to hear it necessarily, but that string is going to vibrate for a long, 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 long time. So obviously that side of the scale is a problem. The other side is a problem too. If a soundboard is made too light, too flexible, you're going to get the impedance is very, very low, too low. You're going to get a huge upfront bang to it, like a snare drum or a cowbell, but no sustain to it. So somewhere in between those things is where the healthiest soundboard is going to exist. So nobody's making a soundboard that's a half-inch thick today, except maybe Rubinstein's, 12-foot piano. And nobody's making a soundboard that's a quarter of an inch thick, panel-wise. Nobody's making soundboards that had ribs that are 2 inches deep, to speak of. And nobody's making them where they're only a quarter of an inch deep either. So typical ribs are about an inch wide, a little less than an inch deep, pretty much. I'm generalizing here. Soundboards are more in the 3/8 of an inch vein throughout the panel, a little less than that actually, and then thin down at the edges. The whole point of all of this is it's been determined and it's been worked out. David or somebody.
Go ahead, David.
Just that there's a global, like fairly small parameter for soundboards, just like there is for actions. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yes, you are. Yeah. Yeah. And the same holds true for guitar tops and violin tops. These things have been worked out. So we do ourselves a disservice if we depart from that too radically. We do have some latitude. I work out rib designs and I work out my own dimensions on the ribs because from the engineering standpoint, I want to have every rib doing the same amount of work as the rib next to it. That's maybe too far afield, but coming around to your bigger question, David, is what are we looking for in terms of a healthy soundboard? So we have to go with the idea that the manufacturer put something in there that's more or less working. It might not be ideal, all things considered, but it's basically working. So I'm looking for bearing. I'm looking for sustain. I'm looking for crown in the soundboard, right? And that's not so easy to do because you have to climb under the piano sometimes and do that. But you can do it even with a 1-foot ruler. You know, if you get under there just right, you push it up there somewhere, you might see, if you see a little bit of a gap there, obviously that's a good thing. That's the most difficult part though, trying to find out, does this soundboard have crown in it? And, you know, we've all done the old, you know, I don't want to do it now, and I like crawling under pianos like that at my age, but used to have the string on a stick and another string on another stick over there, and somehow we managed to get it through the beams and pushed it up, and then had a flashlight just right, saw a shadow and all this. That's not very practical. But you can also kind of get a sense of it just by looking at it. If the light's just right, you can kind of see, okay, you know, the light shines off a bubble differently than it does off a flat plane. You can get some sense of whether there's crown in there, but those are the big things. I want to see that there's some kind of bearing. Now, rear bearing freaks people out, and it should not. When I went to work for, well, maybe I won't mention names, but I measured a whole lot of new bearing on new pianos of various, you know, high-end makes.
Yeah.
And at least 70% of them had either no bearing on the rear or negative bearing on the rear. It wasn't terrible, but it was definitely there. So in that case, if we go back to our bridge here, I didn't think I'd be using this for a bridge. So you have positive bearing coming up, then it crossed over the bridge, and then it went uphill to the rear duplex pump.
Wow.
Okay? Where in our mind, the model should be this, correct?
Yeah.
Right? Or at least flat going off to the duplex pump. But then many of excellent sounding pianos, it goes uphill to the duplex pump. So that's not going to freak me out. That doesn't freak me out. I've seen too many pianos that sound just fine that way. This one, however, is the critical one. This cannot be negative. It can even sort of be flat to a degree, but once it goes this way, there's nothing you can do with it. I mean, you can make anything a little better, but
yeah, that's right. But here's the mystery: is I have maintained pianos for decades with old flat boards that sound great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That sustain and that project, and it's like, why do they?
Well, David,
Do these pianos have negative front bearing? We got to get that out of the way first. Probably not.
They're flat in front.
Right. And I have
they
two.
Don't have, they if they have any uphill at all, they have it on the front.
Yeah, right. So it's still pushing down. It's still pushing down on the board.
Yeah, the fact that the soundboard looks flat to you strung, it still has compression. It still has down bearing on it. Like if you were to take all the strings off, you would notice that the crown would increase. So the fact that it's flat and sounds great says that it's still compressed. Maybe not as much as it was new, but that's why you still have good sound.
Yeah. But here's the bigger question here too,
that's
David.
That's a great answer.
The bigger question here too is we would never build a flat soundboard, right? We couldn't build a flat soundboard, thinking that because we have rebuilt a couple and we've shimmed some boards and we have 2 or 3 pianos in our care that have quote unquote flat soundboards. So therefore, we must conclude that a flat soundboard is the way to go from now on. And that's not the case, right? We still have to build crowns in our boards. And we still have to approach the whole idea that we want to press that board down by introducing energy into it through down bearing. I mean, that's got to be our model. I would say that, and maybe you've seen more of these than I have, but you know, I've rebuilt pianos, quote unquote, that was sort of quasi rebuild thing where a board was shimmed, it wasn't too bad. And it maybe had, let's just a tiny bit of crown that I could see in the bottom of the board, basically flat. And when it came time for me to set the bearing on it, I thought, well, what am I going to do? And years ago, I found out that if I set, not as much as I would on a brand new soundboard, but half of that at least, right, still came out with a good job. So I wouldn't say that, a board that is flat, if it comes into your shop, for example, and you're wondering what to do, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to have a new soundboard, depending on the money and a lot of other factors. But the basic model is the one that we have to keep in mind, because from there we can make departures in our experience and what's acceptable and what's the extreme that we just can't, we can't accept it anymore.
I'm going to cut in here real quick. We're about halfway through the session. It's been going really great. Really appreciate your time and energy, Nick. A couple of things for those folks that are watching on YouTube and Facebook. We're going to sign off those streams. So if you did want to join us on the Zoom chat, I put the link so that you can do that. And then also we've got some questions here in the chat that I think it'd be great to bring into the conversation. So after I'll deliver maybe the first question, and then we'll sign off YouTube and Facebook. So first of all, I did get a request for you to talk about your bread recipes. No, post your bread recipes. Of course, that was tongue in cheek, but clearly it involves a cowbell and a drumstick in some way. So that's fascinating. But we got a question about the bridge surface when it's not flat. And it was a question about why do you think this happens when the bridge surface is not flat? Is that something you have an answer to?
The bridge surface is not flat. Does that mean front to back it has a kind of a hump in it? I'm not sure what the
it's Dave's question, Dave Skolnick, so he might come on in a minute to clarify. I'll move on to the next one, which may make more sense. Vince Mercallo says, is there such a thing as bridge roll?
I'm sorry.
Mercallo.
Yeah.
Vince Mercallo, dude.
Mercallo, thank you. Is there such a thing as bridge roll? And if so, how does this happen?
Good question.
I don't believe so. I do believe there is soundboard roll though. The